in the paper age. I grew up reading newspapers, I grew up reading magazines, flipping through stuff, so comics have always been very important to me, being able to laugh at things that are going on. And I found this in 1996, that ought to tell you how long ago it was. And Dilbert was just coming into fashion. And it's a wonderful career cartoon for me. It says Dilbert's talking, or the dog's talking to Dilbert, and he says, "I'm going to try my pot being a career counselor. Insecure people will seek my advice and I will tell them to be more self-reliant." And Dilbert says, "That sounds lazy and unhelpful. Would you want career advice from somebody who has to work very hard?" I've always taken that to task, is, you don't want a career counselor who looks like they're bogged down with work all the time. They've got to have some levity to their lives. And then another dogbird is trying his hand. "According to your occupational preference test, you like to remove organs from helpless people. That narrows the career choices to doctor or serial killer. Do you get along with other people? Other people or insignificant insects?" Well, we'll have to go to the tiebreaker question then. So I'm going to pepper you with some of my cartoons and as well talk about some of the significant things. As Molly mentioned, it has been a long time. When I sat down to do this presentation, or to think about what I have witnessed over the course of 31 years, it's pretty remarkable. Anybody remember the boat people of the 1980s? That was a huge concern for us then. The numbers of Southeast Asians who had been brought to the South Coast and had gone to Ventura College and Oxnard College and Santa Barbara City College, and then would end up at our four-year universities and colleges. And they were stories unto themselves. I mean, each one of them had something that was unbelievable in terms of their survival. And I was working with one student who'd gone to Oxnard College. He was a young man, middle-aged, probably 35, and he had graduated from our engineering program at UCSB. So we did a whole series of mock interviews with him. I helped him with his presentation and all of this stuff. And during our time together, he told me about his ability to survive in these prisoner of war camps that he was in. He had constructed a 3,000-word poem in his mind that he kept saying over and over and over again. And the guards left him alone because they thought he was crazy. And so they didn't bother him anymore. But he walked around all day reciting this 3,000-word poem from beginning to end. And so he goes into interview with a recruiter from an engineering firm. He comes out of the interview, and I immediately kind of run into the recruiter, and I say, "Well, how did he do? What's going on?" And he said he was a little off-putting, and he made me very nervous because I thought he was going to fall apart. And I said, "Well, what did you ask him?" And he said, "Well, after we got into the interview, I asked him what his greatest achievement was." And he said it took him about 5 minutes to answer because his throat got all caught up and he was just unable to answer. And his words were, "I'm here." That was his greatest accomplishment. I am here. And so I talked the guy into giving him a job. I said, "He doesn't need a second interview. Just give this man a job, for God's sake."
Back in the day, you could do that.
Yes, you could. Yeah. As a little spriter more in those days too, so that helped. But it's really interesting. I got a letter from that man, and he just came into my office as a client, and he wrote me a Christmas card that I've kept for 30 years. That has talked about there are people that come into your life that do wonderful things, and you're one of those. And I was just, huh? I taught you how to put a resume together. What are you talking about? But that's the kind of profound impact we can have, and we do have on a daily basis. We watch miracles happen, and we also make them happen. It's very, very nice. I met Flavia Whedon one time. And she's the lady that does the former Santa Barbara woman that did the cartooning and drawings and stuff. And we were talking about it, and she sent me one of her books, and she said, "You are a dream maker," and that was one of her books, and she signed it to me. And that's what we all are. We're dream makers. We take those dreams and then put those little feet on the ground and say, okay, how are you going to make that dream come true? Because without those little feet on the ground, they're just dreams. They're just dreams. They go on and on and on. I think another thing that happened in the 80s that none of us were prepared for was the AIDS epidemic. And there was all kinds of scare that went with that, and careers, people were wanting to get into research, people were wanting to do all kinds of different things. But for 10 years, there was just this horrific lack of knowledge about AIDS. Who got it, how it happened, there was all kinds of different things, but it really did make a tremendous difference in terms of how students saw themselves. They all of a sudden vulnerable for being young and sexy, and oh my gosh, that didn't sound right, and that wasn't fair, and all of those kinds of things. And it's really tough to be working with someone on career counseling when they come in and tell you they've just gotten their AIDS diagnosis. It's an amazing thing to try to plan out with them their life, and how long it's going to last, and what that quality is going to be. And I asked this woman if she would be more comfortable going to a psychologist to work through these. She said, "No, you're my career counselor, and I'm going to live. I'm going to learn to live with this disease." So I was like, okay, sure don't want to go to a psychologist? Are you sure you want to do it this way? And she did, and she lived quite long, actually, for probably about 10 years with her disease, and did live. So I was really very proud of that. I took a year off in 1988 to actively parent my child, and the office did a terrible thing to me. They computerized everything. The year that I was gone. And, coming back from maternity leave, I was so excited to be back at work. I mean, I loved being home with my children, but I was just, I'll do it. I was volunteering to do everything because I was just, back at work. And nothing was making any sense. Everybody kept saying, well, email me. And I'm still writing memos, and doing this stuff or going. And at one point in staff meeting, I remember I just burst into tears, just these big crocodile tears, and my director was Dennis Nord at the time. I don't know if you know Dennis, but Dennis isn't really an emotional guy, and he kept saying, "Stay together, Lily, what's the matter? What's the matter?" He was just, come on, and I was just tears, and I said, "I feel like you guys are talking Greek, and I don't know anything about it." And so that was my introduction as a career counselor into using computers, and it was never quite an easy relationship. I have summers off, and I came back after one summer, and Michael Kemp was our director, and I'm sure lots of you know Michael. And I went into my email box, and there was just so many emails, and I thought, oh, screw this, and I hit the delete button. I mean, not knowing what that was going to do, I just, So we're in staff meeting, and Michael said, well, did you get the email I sent? I said, well, I don't know. I just deleted all the summer ones because I wasn't here. And the look on her face was just, she said, Lily, you did what? And thank God Don Lubach was still in our office. And he said, I'll get them back for you. But, I have this bizarre relationship with computers. When I was writing my book, Unlimited Options, one day I was sitting in my house re-editing, and I hit a button on the computer and all the C's disappeared. All the C's. Try writing a book on career counseling with no C's. It drove me crazy. And the hardest word for me to try and reassemble was choice. You just have HOIE. What the hell is this word? This demon word that I see. So it took me I worked at the computer probably 10 hours that day, replacing all my C's because I couldn't figure out how to make the C's reappear. And all of you obviously know that there's a way because you're laughing like crazy. Next day, My husband worked on the computer that night. He checked his email. He did something. He didn't work on my work, but he worked on the computer, and the C's were back. I mean, but I had spent like 10 hours going through every page looking for, okay, what's this word? How many C's are missing in this word? So that's kind of been my relationship with computers the whole time. You know, it's just, Maddie is new to our staff, and she's been selected, I think, just because you are new and shiny. If I forget to do, or I forget how to do something, it's Maddie! She comes running over. Thank you very much for that. You've fulfilled your role magnificently, I have to tell you. One of the big things that I really felt was important in terms of what I did to make myself understand students better is I worked with students on what I called career chronologies. And they were very much autobiographies, but where students talked about work. When is your first memory of when people left you? You know, you were a child and they went someplace else, and how, you know, what was that all about? And what did your parents do for a living? How did they feel about the work that they did? You know, and what were their career aspirations? Did you have a crazy old aunt that was always, you know, living high on the dog, but nobody knew what she did? She just was flitting around the world doing these kinds of things, and everybody was like, oh, you know, Gladys, she's just a... And you were like, yay, go Gladys, you know, because she seemed to be happy, and everybody else was, you know, going to work every day doing the same thing. And, you know, Gladys was you know, wearing heels and minks and going out for drinks, and I just thought, well, good for Gladys. But the career chronology really gets students in touch with their families, and I think it's a really important thing because it's at a time in their lives when they're trying to individuate, they're trying to separate, and you want that separation to be a positive kind of experience. So after the students were doing their career chronologies, I'd ask in class, and I would say, anybody find out anything that was new and exciting about your parents that you didn't know? And they found out some really interesting things, and probably the funniest one I found was this woman was saying she had sat down with her father, who was a very successful lawyer. I mean, you know, this guy probably always looked like a very successful lawyer, even in first grade. He was just, you know, that cut from that cloth. There goes that very successful lawyer. And she asked him how he got through law school. I mean, how was it that you got through law school? And her father told her that he'd been a comedian at a comedy club off campus, and she didn't believe him. She was like, oh, you're not funny, are you kidding? No, Dad, you couldn't have done that. She said that he stood up and did a 20-minute riff that had her in stitches. She could not believe. I mean, he just, right there, just did it. And she said, I never, ever knew that about my father, and I never knew there was that part of him. And it really changed their relationship. He became somehow more accessible to her because she knew that. And I also think it really gives people, in terms of career chronologies, a chance to take a look at what their fears are about the work world and where those fears come from. Where those fears come from. You know, the expectations that first-generation parents put on their children and the expectations all parents put on their children are hard to carry around. And most of our students grow up seeing parents already grown up, already successful, already doing these things. They forget that they weren't always, that they were once that dweeby little law student who, you know, was telling funny jokes to get through class. So the career chronology is something that I have done for years, and I hope I give that as a gift to you as a way to really work with students and understand what their, how much control they have over their future, or how responsible they are for their future. One of the other things that kind of happened to me during the 80s is I came up with, or I discovered the concept of attitude. And attitude is so very important to me. When I was in graduate school, I was charged with reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I see a few heads nod. I think it was classic reading for social work and psychology classes. But I didn't even get into the book. The introduction had me right from the very beginning. Viktor Frankl talked about, he was a Viennese psychiatrist right in the 30s and 40s and was a Jewish man and was taken to the concentration camps. And he said that everything was stripped of the people in the concentration camps. Their hair was shorn, their jewelry, their clothes. They were meant to dehumanize, to make these people feel less than human. And he said that one day he ran across a woman who was singing. Lovely song, and she was happy, and she said, and he said, "Are you nuts? What's wrong with you? Do you know where you are?" And she said, "Yes, but the sun came up today and it's lovely, and I'm grateful for that." And so he began to look around and see people that had the attitude. And he started to talk about, how do I choose to feel? He said that attitude was the last of human freedoms, the freedom that cannot be taken away because it's how we choose to feel about things. That has had such an incredible, that passage, not even the book, I don't even think I read the book. I was so blown away by that one passage that I kind of closed it and put it next to the Bible. But attitude is so important. How do I choose to feel about this certain set of circumstances? Did you get fired? That sucks, but oh boy, what does that mean? Now let's look at what some of the possibilities are. Always, always teach your students to ask, because what their attitude is will have an impact on their journey and on the outcome. I'm not saying that having a good attitude isn't going to make things difficult, but having a good attitude will get you through. If you have students that are, oh, I don't want to go out in the job market, it's going to be hard, there's lots of, I looked for jobs, there's nothing available. Wow, so you might as well just stay home then for the rest of your life. Because if it's that hard, it's not going to be possible. But you need to get them to see the difference in perspective. You're one of the most highly trained people in the state of California. You have all of these skills. What do you think about your presence in the world? If you don't find your place in the world, who is going to find their place in the world? And then we got to some students in my Ed 164 class that were selective listeners. I always do, I think, Marley, you even were one of my TAs in that class. When I talked about this study the UN does every 5 years on educational levels and work attainment across the world. And so the statistics had said that if you possess a bachelor's degree, a lot of people in here obviously do, and in my class, a lot of them were working on getting their bachelor's degree. The UN said that the statistic was that you make up 15% of the world's population. Now, I've got a bunch of screaming kids in my classroom saying, we can't find jobs, we can't find jobs, we can't find jobs. I said, you're 15% of the world's population. Stop whining. Go figure it out. You have, and I remember saying this, on the day you graduate, you have more choices than 85% of the people that walk the face of the earth. Don't tell me you don't have choices. You don't have information. Once you get the information, you'll have choices, so stop whining. Then I went on to say that if you have a bachelor, a master's, or a professional degree, or a PhD, you become 5% of the world's population. I mean, think about that. 5% of the world's population. So there was this young woman in the class who listened to all of this, and then she kind of just blew off the rest of the class. And I called her in and I said, what's the matter? You were doing really good work, and now all of a sudden, and she says, well, you said I was 15% of the population. I'm not going to have to look very hard for work, so have them come, they can come and look for me. Given my personality, I almost wrung her out on a hand washer. It was just, what are you talking about? But selective listening. Well, I'm 15%. Here I am, law, come and get me. Not going to work. So attitude, I want to tell you that attitude is really important. Making your students understand that the world is much bigger and greater than theirs. The other thing that I found during the 80s that was really very, very remarkable is in my career chronologies, I found out how mad students were at their parents in the 80s. Oh my God, they were furious. This was the Reagan administration, copious consumption. They had bigger jets, bigger houses, huge salaries. They'd take these extended vacations. They had a nanny to take care of the kids. It was just more. And these career chronology papers were, I mean, they were burning in my hands, the degree of anger that these kids felt over their parents. They're never at my baseball games. The nanny's always there. The nanny does this, or, they never come to my class meetings. I'm never going to be a parent like that. I had one student who wrote how he could not believe the day his mother left him and went to work. And I said, your father left you and went to work every day of your life. You didn't have a problem with that. Well, but she's my mother. She should take care of me. And I was just like, oh, God, relax. Give her a break. And I used to tell him, ease up on your parents. Give them a break. But they were very, very angry. And there was a lot of, I will not raise my children this way, or I will not make work my top priority. And that was real painful to see. But they either worked it out or they don't talk to their parents anymore. I don't know. 1989, hard to believe it was that long ago, the Berlin Wall fell. I mean, just put that into perspective. Covered wagons came across the West. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, the 90s was interesting in terms of the students. Recession happened. Lots of employers rescinded offers that students had. They had offers from accounting firms, engineering firms early in the year, and by March, a majority of those offers had been rescinded. A lot of the students at UCSB, as I'm sure on your campuses, were dealing with parents, maybe both sometimes, that had been laid off. I had a student ask if his parents could come and sit in on my career class to get some hints. They were sharing my lectures with their parents because they'd been laid off. It was a very scary time for students because if their parents could be laid off, then nothing was secure. I mean, if their level of security had been ripped out from under them, then nothing was secure. So they got real needy. They wanted to make sure that the jobs paid a lot of money. They didn't care if they loved them. And so that was a real challenge to get them to move more towards the center on that you can have both in moderation, or you can try and have it that way. We went to war in the 90s. That was Desert Storm. And I remember this, there was so many discussions in classes about very few students dropped out of any university or college and went and enlisted in the war to fight. I'm sure you remember there was very few, and that's fine. I just raised that as there were discussions in our classes about, well, if they don't have any other choices, then the military is a perfect place for them to go. I mean, just this elitism, this sense of entitlement. I'm here, but because they don't have an opportunity to go to college, well then, I mean, yeah, they should go to the Army. That makes perfect sense. Fodder, young men for fodder, young men and women for fodder. We spent a lot of time talking about those things and values and what they were really saying about themselves and their place in the world. And it was, they didn't like me very much for a couple of weeks because I kept harping on that value statement, Those are expendable lives because they don't have trust funds. Those are expendable lives because their parents haven't gone to college or because their parents are undocumented. Those are people we can throw away. It was very, I didn't like it at all. Most of our students at that point, foreign students, were coming in from Russia and the Middle East, and being a Law and Order fan from the word go since I was a kid, movies about the Russian mob or Law and Order stories about the Russian mob have always intrigued me. So I was very interested in the Russian students that came on at that time. Also very impressed with their ability to learn the language and assimilate as quickly as they did. It was amazing, their ability. Within 7-8 months, they were fully capable of speaking English and competing, and I just didn't understand how that happened so quickly for some and not for others. We had a lot of students from the Middle East then that were coming to campuses. increase in applications to graduate schools went up. If the economy's bad, graduate school applications are going to go up. Well, you know, that's the way. So what happens is you get a lot of unqualified people applying for graduate schools, and then you get another rejection. You know, the job market doesn't want me, graduate school doesn't want me. What's the deal here? So career centers became more electronically driven. I mean, everything was done, you know, with a little tap of the button, or not the delete button. In 1999, the internet was introduced as public domain. Think about that. What did we do before? How did we survive? And you're talking to an anti-computer person here. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I don't even know how we got messages across to people, you know, in other buildings. I just don't know how we did. I mean, did we walk over there? Did we write them a letter? I mean, I don't know how that happened, because we don't even hardly pick up the phone anymore. You know, does anybody call it? No, hardly ever. So those changes were very interesting to me. And I also realized that the first Coachella Music Festival was in 1999. And we have lots of students who miss school to go to that, so I wanted to make a point of that. The year 2000 came and nothing happened. The whole world was worried that something was going to happen, that we were going to fly off into nether space, that, you know, aliens were going to come, all that. And nothing happened. And nothing happened. It was just, oh, well, we're in the year 2000, I guess. Then 9/11 happened, and nothing was ever the same. And nothing will ever be the same after 9/11. Students were just left totally vulnerable. They weren't sure what to do. They weren't sure how to react. We had students that were abroad at that time. I'm sure you did too. How do you get your students back home? How do you do those kinds of things? And it was a tragic, tragic incident that will forever mark all of our lives. You know, the older generation, my peeps, remember when John Kennedy and Martin Luther King were killed. Those days will be forever in our minds, just like 9/11 will be for the generation that was young when it happened. Jobs started leaving American shores because of trade agreements, NAFTA, those kinds of things. Jobs were starting to be outsourced, and people were getting very angry about the fact that industry was moving out into smaller populations where they could pay less. STEM majors took a front seat on campus. Boy, if you were in a STEM major, if you had the guts to major in art, keep it to yourself. Just keep it to yourself. Don't talk about it. Don't, you know, liberal arts, oh, forget it. You know, and then the worst, sociology, what are you going to do with that? No, STEM majors were walking around like they were the King Jujubee of the campus. They were strutting their stuff. And so we had to build up these poor little liberal arts majors and humanities majors and really do some good work with them in terms of the value of their degrees, the value of what they were doing. And so our work became much more, I think, much more intimate, much more about values and about what is it that you want your life to be? How is it that you want to live your life? I spent a lot of time talking to students in my class about the concept of enough. What is enough? And how are you going to determine for yourself what enough is? Because if you don't know what enough is, you're never going to be satisfied. You're going to strive and strive for some elusive out there that's never going to make enough enough. So we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, give me your definition of enough. What is it that you're going to have to do? A couple of quarters ago, I decided to do guerrilla warfare with my students and just, you know, throw them into it. 2 weeks after the class started, there was 200 students in the class. 2 weeks after, they were required to go to our on-campus career fair with 100 employers. They had to look at the list of the employers. They had to pick 5 employers that they were going to go up and talk to. They needed to prepare an elevator pitch to do that. And then they needed to walk away and be able to report to the class what they found out. And it was just, they were, oh my gosh, we can't do this, we can't do this. We haven't been in this class long enough. And on the day of the career fair, I made a big sign that said Edwin 64 so that my students could all gather. And they just looked like shiny pennies. They were so cute. They were all dressed up. They had their hair done, too big a high heel and all that stuff. But, they were there. They were there dressed like their moms had. So I was sending them in like 3 at a time. Okay, go in. Now you. Now the next bunch. And it was remarkable. It was remarkable what happened to those students. They walked out laughing, feeling comfortable, saying, this is really hard, but it's kind of fun if you go with a buddy and all this kind of stuff. They got all the swag and stuff. And then all of a sudden in my class, interesting things started happening. Students were raising their hands saying, I got a call from the career fair people. I have an interview. I have an interview. I have 2 interviews. I got 3 interviews. And I'm just like, see, it works. It works. It works. You need to go there and do that. So as their final charge for the class, because I felt they had done so well, they were even negotiating salaries for behavior interventionists, people that work with autistic children. This one guy got a job where he was offered $17 an hour and he wanted 21. But the guys that were offering 17 had a better training program for him. And so, we sat down and figured out how he was going to negotiate that. And he came back into the class and said, I got the $21. And everyone was amazed. It's like, he said, it's just like she says. If you do it, it's just like, I think, career counselors, we can take over the world. But the DREAM Act came into play. We had a new population of people that really needed to be worked with and given some support because it wasn't coming from any place else. The government, the school. I still feel that one of our main area target populations are the DREAM scholars because we graduate them in record numbers and they're wonderful students and they are intelligent. They are the top 10% of the state of California and they can't get jobs. They are barred from getting jobs. So we have a whole cadre of our best and brightest that is relegated to jobs under the table, cash-paying jobs, or breaking the law to work for an employer that's not supposed to. And I think that if we offer them a university education, it's absolutely cruel to prohibit them from working. It's just not right. There was an article 2 weeks ago in the LA Times, great big article, about the number of DREAM scholars who are going back to their countries of origin because they can't find anything here. They don't want to work under the table. And they're living fabulous lives back in their home countries, but they're without family. They're without whatever they knew in the US, but they can get a job. So I think it's almost criminal that we encourage DACA students to graduate and then we have nothing to offer them. I know Maddie's going to do a presentation later today on career opportunities for DACA students, so I wish you luck. And the struggle continues. We need to keep looking for those kinds of things. Increases in tuition. Students had to really scramble to find money. Students were taking longer, 4, 5, 6 years to graduate because they couldn't get classes. Another interesting thing is in the millennium, we started getting students from China and India. Very, very large numbers of students who came with the impression that student services was going to be able to meet their needs. And that's one of the things that didn't happen is student affairs didn't have the foresight to come to career services and say, do you know how to get visas for foreign students? Do you know how many employers? I mean, just the whole concept of working with a new population on employment issues, they forgot to tell us about it, and we were scrambling for ways to provide adequate services to this population, and I think we still are. And that's what happens sometimes is people will make changes at higher levels and then forget the implications and the ramifications to people that are on the front lines trying to work with these students. And I do think that was a big flaw in what happened during the 2000s when we were enrolling so many students from foreign countries. I have no problem with having foreign students, but give me the tools that I need to work with them so I'm not sitting there, with my thumb up my nose saying, gee, I'm sorry you can't get a job. That's not a career counselor's way. I remember telling my Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Michael Young. Well, that's just not the career counselor's way. We can't do it that way. And he, said, Lily, calm down. Told me to go away. It's just been a hell of a ride. It really, really has. I've had some very interesting clients along the way that are absolutely unforgettable. Again, I don't even, it must have been in the 90s, I had a student come in who, and I'm trying to be as politically correct as I can be, and I will be politically correct. The student was from the Middle East, and he came in because he was having visa troubles, and he came in to talk with me, and he was clearly angry. You could tell he was angry, but I hadn't heard him speak yet. And I said, well, I hear you're having troubles getting a work visa. And out of this incredibly Sephardic-looking face comes this. First, I have to find a wife, then I get a work visa. Yeah, I did the same thing, huh? What? First, I have to find a wife, then I get a work visa. He had gone to school in Sweden, and so he was speaking English with a Swedish accent. I had him in my office for like 2 hours, just asking him questions because it was just so incredible to hear this just cognitive dissonance at its very best. And he became a long-standing client, and we did very well. But his Swedish accent was just, it's like my ears were just, no, this isn't right, this isn't right. I also had, much to my staff's dismay, a vampire who was a client of mine. Yeah, I know. I was a little eerie at first. Young man, remember what Eddie Munster used to look like? With that little peak here. This guy came in very, very pale, all dressed in all black, kind of slithering around the corners like this. So he sits down and we start talking about, okay, what can I help you with? What are you going to do? What do you need? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, I need to find a career. I'm graduating and I said, well, okay, what would you like to do? And so we started the conversation, and slowly and surely it came out that he was a vampire. I said, oh, okay. That's good. I said, then medical, what does that mean? I wasn't going to ask him. But I said, well, probably medical careers are not what you want to be involved with. And it was so amazing. Then finally I said, hey, wait a minute. If you're a vampire, what are you doing out during the day? Come on, stick to type here. And he said, well, I'm slowly leaving the colony. Okay, you're slowly leaving the colony, so we can start getting to work on some of these things. But apparently there was a Dungeons and Dragons thing on the computer that turned into vampire things, and there was underground colonies and yada, yada, yada. But I got him when I said, if you're a vampire, what are you doing out during the day? So you get people. You don't pick your clients pick you. And it's interesting. I'll have students come to me and it's just like, okay, my roommate came to you and she said that you're going to be really hard, but go ahead. I'm just like, what? What am I doing that is so scary to people? I don't work well with freshmen and sophomores because I scare them. There's too much intensity and they're just like, no, go away. So my office has really made it much, much more conducive for me to work with students as they're exiting the university. And, I'm pushing them out the door and doing that kind of stuff. I'm not real good at the nurturing the freshman and sophomore. But again, there was something that happened to me very early. After I had my first child in 1988, I came back to the university the September after my child was born. And I'd gone to orientations before. I'd gone and seen all the new freshmen and, looked at them and kind of thought, oh my God, we've got these people to deal with now. And, just kind of, there they are. Now I looked at these people as a new mother and I were like, oh, these are somebody's babies. They're sending them to us to take care of them. I mean, my attitude changed completely. You know, these weren't those smart-ass 18-year-olds anymore. They were somebody's baby that had sent me to them. And my attitude hasn't changed. They're still somebody's baby, and they deserve good quality care and treatment and things like that. I think I'd like to stop because I don't know how long I'm supposed to go, and God knows I could go for days on this.
But I have to ask, what did the vampire's career end up being?
He was a phlebotomist. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea. He went on to
Okay.
but I came out of no grad school. No. But I did encourage phlebotomy. You know, I figured. So I want to show you some of these cartoons because I've kept them for so long. This is the Seven Dwarfs revamped for the 90s. Remember when everything was politically correct? Dopey is differently intellectually abled. Grumpy is poor anger management skills. Happy is Prozac dependent. I like that. Sneezy is not wellness conscious. Sleepy has chronic fatigue syndrome. Bashful is codependent, and Doc is the perpetual grad student. So I mean, it was very, very funny. And I love this one. It was just, I see you involved in sports. There's a pig and a fortune teller, and she's reading his fortune. I see you involved in sports with cheering fans in a ballpark. Yes, yes. Surrounded by lots of mustard. Look at the look on his face. And then this one, I homage to my family. I come from a family of Spanish Basque in southern Colorado who are sheep ranchers and farmers. And when I saw this, I just thought it was the funniest thing. Because they're falling asleep counting sheep. I know, I'm a farm girl, what can I say? When I saw that, it was hysterical. How many sheep do you have? I don't know, we keep falling asleep counting them. It's just not a good thing. You know, and my son was allowed to go twice actually, on the annual sheep drive that my family still does, where all the cousins get together and drive literally on horseback the sheep up about 40 miles to grazing land during the summer. And you've got 2,000 head of sheep and about 8 stockmen and about 15 dogs, and then the guard dogs taking these these sheep through. And my son was able to be a part of that for two years in a row, and it's a real big part of who I am, and I wanted my children to be able to experience that as well. Ergo, the sheep joke. We just had to do it. Oh, this one. Oh my gosh, these were the early ones. Employment opportunities abound at the world's first job fair. Here you've got a hunter, a gatherer, an inventor, and then food source. Always opportunities, you just have to find them. Here's the Myers-Briggs. From now on, all teams will be formed on the basis of the Myers-Briggs personality type. If you do not have a personality, one will be assigned to you by Human Resources. We need a quiet, dumb guy to pair with the extroverted thinker. My homage to the Myers-Briggs. I imagine you'll be interested in one of the more highly visible occupations. And then she's just so cute. I don't think great hair belongs on your resume, Ms. Jones. Just look at her. She's so happy with her little hair up that way. And this one, I put this up here because this is the cartoon that inspired me to do a workshop for skateboarders on campus, careers in skateboarding. It's Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin says, I hate going to school, I wish I was a tiger. Tigers don't need to know anything. Hobbes says, really? Attacking running animals includes a lot of physics. There's velocity, gravity, and the laws of motion, not to mention all the biology we have to know. Then there's the artistic expression of it all, and a lot more. He says, gosh, I never realized that killing was so grounded in the liberal arts. And Hobbes says, yes, my dissertation on ethics was very well received. Now, the reason this inspired me is because of all that physics, gravity, law of motion and stuff. My son is a skateboarder and has been from the time he could crawl. And so I decided that if he was going to be a skateboarder, if he wasn't going to be good enough to be a sponsored skateboarder, he was going to have to look at skateboarding as a career. So I started looking at the industry of skateboarding, careers in skateboarding. Did this workshop, put at the bottom of the flyer, skateboards welcome, did all that stuff. And I could not get, you're familiar with Powell Peralta, the skateboard shop or the factory that's out in Goleta. I called their headquarters 3 or 4 times, which is on Hollister. I mean, I'm not talking New York, Chicago, anyplace else, and told them I wanted to do this workshop and I'd really like for them to come. And they kept giving me this, well, we'll have to check with corporate and blah, 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 blah. So 3 or 4 times I went home and I told my son, you know, Powell Peralta's not willing to do anything for me. I can't, you know, I'm really mad at them. The man I was trying to reach went to the skateboard park to pick up his son one day, and Benji was there, and he says to the man, why are you giving my mother such a hard time? He says, you should be helping her with this. You know, she's going to do it. And he goes, what? That's your mother? My son had more cred than I did. I couldn't believe it. You know, this guy from Powell Peralta comes with skateboards, trucks, wheels, sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats. I was like, yes, yes. But it was because of my son's pull, not mine, that we were able to do this. But what I did is I did exactly this. I talked about skateboarding because of the chemistry of the wheels, the materials they make the wheels from, engineering because of physics, velocity, speed. It's based on geometry with all the angles that they look. I mean, skateboarders look at the world differently. They look for jumps. They look for whatever they're called. But they look at the world differently. And so I did a whole workshop on skateboarding because I needed to convince my son that he could earn a living. And there was probably 40 students in the skateboarding thing and in the workshop. And forevermore, occasionally I'll be walking on campus and I'll hear somebody from far away, skateboard lady rocks. You know, and I think they really appreciated it because I gave them job sites and job listings and job titles that people in the skateboarding industry do. You know, clothing designers and all that stuff. And they could go home to their parents and say, look, it is an industry, it is an industry. And then I got nasty letters from fathers saying, what the hell are you doing there? Comics go on, but I certainly, oh, this guy, look at him. Well, Doug, according to your aptitude test, you would do well as an apple picker, a professional juggler, or a concert pianist. Why? He has 3 arms, yes. This one. Successfully designed and implemented an 1,800-foot escape tunnel at a maximum security prison. Wow, our engineering department is going to love having you on board. With good technical people in short supply, many employers have loosened their hiring standards. You know, that's before STEM. Suffice to say, I'm trying to wind this down and I'm not sure I can. It has been a wonderful run for me. I cannot tell you how much I have enjoyed this. And I really do feel like I stumbled onto my future. Most of you have heard this story, but I found my brother's resume when I was 6 years old. And he was 12 years older than I was, and he was just, you know, splatted out on the living room floor, eating potato chips, watching a baseball or a football game. And I was sneaking in his room, as little sisters would do, and I found his resume. And I kept looking at what it said on the paper and what that big blob was in the other room. And I mean, it was just, no way. No, I mean, literally, it was just, wow, you're this guy? And unfortunately, I'm such a bizarre little person that I started writing my own resumes after 4th grade. I would sit down and I'd take my history class. What did I learn from history? I would take, you know, weird. I was a very weird child. But nonetheless, I fell onto my future very, very quickly. And when I started out as a therapist, was trained as a therapist, a psychiatric social worker, did that for about 3 years, and it always felt hard. At the end of the day, I was tired. At the beginning of the next day, it was like, okay, here I go again. It was not gratifying enough because I need lots and lots of stimulation, and to be able to only help people sustain their mental health was not enough for me. It just wasn't. And so there was all this static coming into my career, all this that wasn't coming in right. Remember the old radios? Students look at me now and go, right? But the static, there was static. When I turned to career counseling, when I made the switch, the music was coming in clear. It was loud, it was strong, and it stayed that way ever since. And so I feel very fortunate to have stumbled onto my future as young as I did. And what I try to do with these students now is to get them to look at their future as anything they want it to be. But first and foremost, I ask them, what are you prepared to do about it? Because nobody's going to do it for you. Wishing will not make it so. He who hesitates is lost. I have all of these little one-liners that I throw out every once in a while. I don't know how I got so lucky to do this. And the thing that really gives me pause is that I know that at least once a month I was in the presence of genius. You know, there were people that walked through that you just wanted to go, oh, because you knew they were they just had it. And what a pleasure. I could walk into a lecture with a Nobel laureate and be there and listen and actually talk to him afterwards. You know, there's students that I've seen that are going to win Grammys, Oscars, maybe a Nobel laureate or two, I have no doubt. And that's really satisfying. You know, people may say I may not have done much with my life. If anybody said that in this room, I'd go at you. But the people that I have worked with are my calling card. They're the people that have gone out and done what they've done because of something that I've told them or something that they've done and paid attention to. And that's what we do. So consider yourself dream makers in the finest sense of the word. And actualists, you have to make them understand that it's up to them to do it. What are you prepared to do about it? So that's kind of all I have. Do you have questions or anything? Oh, you want more cartoons? Thank you. Oh, gee whiz. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm done.
Thank you so much, Lily. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Everything and more of it I had hoped for.
Oh, well, that's good. Thank you.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
If you had a young person, maybe in their early 20s, who said, I want to be a career counselor, what direction would you send them? Would it be clinical psych graduate school or higher ed counseling graduate school?
I'd probably send them to a career counseling master's program. That's going to be the easiest route to go. I know that there's a lot of us that came into career counseling from lots of different routes. I mean, I came in through social work. But I think the career counseling programs that certainly are in California are excellent. They're just, you know, every one of the students they graduate is really very, very good at what they do. And there's evidence of that in this room. So I would go straight career counseling, and then they'll find out soon enough whether it's what they want to do. And it would be, I just can't imagine that it won't be something that is just, I get to do this? Yeah.
And then it also sounds like you love the Myers-Briggs. I'm wondering if there's another test that you really like to use.
I don't know if I love the Myers-Briggs so much. I just have great stories to tell during the Myers-Briggs. And so students listen when I do the Myers-Briggs. I just go for it on the Myers-Briggs. And I think it's an incredibly useful tool because it teaches us about ourselves. And it also teaches us that people are doing things not to drive us crazy, but that's just how they do that. And at work, I think that's a really important thing, you know? That person's not doing it because of me, that's how they do things.
Have you used the Strengths Finder, or what do you
Yes,
think about
yes.
it?
The Strengths Finder is a new thing that I don't know if it's new to the world, but it's new to our office. And we've got some of our new staff who are very well versed in that. So I think Strengths Finder will find a very, very good place among the assessments. And I think that's one of the things that made me decide that it was time to go, time to retire, because we just finished the end of a 5-year plan, completed the task. We're going to be in the process of starting another 5-year plan. We're bringing in new assessments and all that stuff, and quite frankly, I don't want to learn that stuff. I mean, I don't know how much more honest I can be. I want to divert my mental energy to something else that I don't even know what that's going to be yet, but I just know that the office is in such good shape. We have such wonderful, wonderful new people in on our staff that I can go, you know, read dirty novels. I can go do something else, you know.
Or sheep farming.
Sheep farming, yes, yes. Yes.
What other innovative workshops have you put together for youth?
Oh, the skateboarding one. I don't know. It's been so long. Oh, we had one of our career counselors who did one in careers in the beer industry. And I have been challenged for years, but I won't do it, to do a workshop on careers in the cannabis industry.
In which industry?
Cannabis. You know, the seeds that people sell, all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's a little too soon for that to happen in this state. Yeah.
We just had a comment. One of the people that won the best entrepreneur from our school won seed money to make jewelry out of hemp.
Out of hemp, yeah. Well, you know, the American flag was made of hemp. It's not such a ratty little thing. The original American flag was made of hemp. And you know, the reason that we have forests instead of hemp fields is because William Randolph Hearst had forests instead of, and so he needed paper mill. He wanted paper, so he cut down trees instead of letting hemp grow. Don't ask me how I know all this.
For those of you that might be interested in doing more with Myers-Briggs and Strong that are already using it and want the next level, I'm trying to collect names of those who might want to do a training with us locally, because the 5-6 of us in our City College Career Center are already using it all the time as our assessment Strong and Myers-Briggs. But we want to get the cost down and not go to LA and San Francisco, and we've already contacted CPP. So if anyone is interested in digging in deeper and getting into some of those fine-tuning issues where you're good at everything else, but you've got a problem of everybody being flat or something, sign up on the list and we can talk.
Yes.
I have 2 questions, please. Where did you go to school, and what is the best way to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn?
On the computer. How about that? No, that's fine. That's fine. Where did I go to school? I went to school at the University of Colorado for undergraduate. And then I went to the University of Washington for School of Social Work. And then I went to George Washington University on a fellowship when talk about old age, when the Department of Education was forming, when they took health, education, and welfare and split it apart. They picked 2 educators from each state to go and watch the formation of this, and in the process, you received a master's degree in higher education. So that was real fun. You know, I won't say I had as much fun as Monica Lewinsky, but I came damn close. You know, on that note, we'll leave. Yes, thank you, thank you. Oh, getting in touch with me. So let me give you.
Thank you so very much.